Please rise for the posting of the colors and the national anthem.
Present arms.
Oh, say, can you see by the dawn's early light what so proudly we hailed at the twilight's last gleaming, whose broad stripes and bright stars through the perilous fight o'er the ramparts we watched were so gallantly streaming, and the rockets trembling, the bombs bursting in air, gave proof through the night that our flag was still there. Oh, say does that star-spangled banner yet wave o'er the land of the free and the home of the brave?
Order arms. Post. Right face. Forward march.
Let us begin in the name of the Father, and of the Son, and of the Holy Spirit. Father, we ask for blessings on all those who have served our country in the armed forces. We ask for healing for the veterans who have been wounded in body and soul in conflicts around the globe. We pray especially for the young men and women in thousands who are coming home from war with wounded bodies and traumatized spirits. Have mercy on all our veterans from World War II, Korea, Vietnam, Bosnia, Iraq, and Afghanistan. Bring peace to their hearts and peace to the regions they fought in. Lord, remember those who have died in service of our country, and to the thousands of servicemen and women currently deployed around the world, that they complete their assigned missions and are quickly returned to their families. Give us all the vision to see a world which, growing weary with fighting, moves to affirming the life of every human being, and so moves beyond war. Hear our prayer, Prince of Peace. Hear our prayer. In the name of the Father, and of the Son, and of the Holy Spirit. Amen. Please take your seats. In the hustle and bustle of our daily lives, we often don't take the time to pause and reflect on the true meaning of Veterans Day and the contributions veterans have made to our country. Armistice Day, or Veterans Day as we know it, was established by President Woodrow Wilson on the 11th day of November in 1919. Armistice Day celebrated the end of hostilities for World War I, which occurred on the 11th hour of the 11th day of the 11th month in 1918. On that day, the guns fell silent, the killing stopped, and the war to end all wars was over. In recognition of the sacrifices made by over 116,000 Americans killed during World War I, President Wilson proclaimed, "To us in America, the reflections of Armistice Day will be filled with solemn pride in the heroism of those who died in the country's service and with gratitude for the victory, both because of the thing from which it freed us and because of the opportunity it has given America to show her sympathy with peace and justice and the Council of Nations. It has been almost 100 years since President Wilson's established Veterans Day to recognize the sacrifices of our nation's fighting men and women. Each year, as a nation, we come together with solemn pride to pay homage to the heroism and sacrifices of our soldiers, sailors, airmen, Coast Guardsmen, and Marines from World War I in every conflict our nation has undertaken since. Today, we are honored to have with us Colonel John Boucher, United States Army and STA class of 1986. As with recent tradition, when we introduce a graduate as a speaker, we like to go over his accomplishments as a cadet. John Boucher, or as he was nicknamed, Boucher, was a first lieutenant in band company and was an accomplished musician, placing first in the Minnesota State Jazz Ensemble and was named a distinguished musician by the state. In addition, he was number 53 on the varsity football team. He lettered in football and wrestling. Most interesting about his entry in the 1986 yearbook was the quote, Becky, Sarah, Barb, Teresa, and Yvonne. Not sure what that means, but I thought it was worth mentioning. After STA, Colonel Boucher attended St. John's University, graduating in 1990. While at SJU, he participated in the Army ROTC program, where he was selected as a distinguished military graduate and commissioned as a second lieutenant in Army intelligence. He has served in a variety of tactical, strategic, and national staff and command leadership positions in intelligence, special operations, and diplomatic assignments around the world. His postings include Germany, Korea, Morocco, Iraq, the Balkans, Afghanistan, and several assignments in the continental United States. Colonel Boucher's award include the Joint Meritorious Unit Award with Oak Leaf Cluster, the Bronze Star with 2 Oak Leaf Clusters, the Defense Meritorious Service Medal with 3 Oak Leaf Clusters, plus numerous other decorations. In addition, he is a graduate of the U.S. Army Ranger School, Airborne School, and holds the French, Russian, and German parachute badges. Currently, Colonel Boucher is the commander, Human Intelligence Training, Joint Center of Excellence, Fort Huachuca, Arizona. Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome Colonel John Boucher, STA, class of 1986.
Good morning, St. Thomas cadets, faculties, teachers, staff, distinguished visitors. I'm extremely proud and honored to speak to you on Veterans Day. I see we have a number of veterans among us today. I would like to start out with giving them applause as well, please. Thank you. I want to thank you all for your service to our grateful nation. This holiday is significant because for more than 238 years, men and women have served our great country. The key theme of my remarks today is about service. Service in all forms or fashions, and I'll get to that a little bit later. My first memories of someone in uniform came from watching television. And you wouldn't believe me if I told you how big televisions were back then. This was before Twitter, same time, FaceTime, Xbox, the internet. I remember watching the nightly news with my parents there, and we watched this guy by the name of Walter Cronkite. Now, you students probably don't know him, but back then, a very long time ago, your mom and dad were my age, maybe even younger, maybe not even born yet. I'm probably a little older than some of them. But back then, there were only 2 ways in which we got information and news. One was from the radio, and the other one was from the television. And it wasn't cable, dish, or satellite back then. And back then, there were only 4 news channels. There was no ESPN7, there was no Fox Sports, CNN. We received our news every night at 6 o'clock. And when I was your age, the United States had just gone through one of its most difficult periods in history. And there are 2 vivid memories that I had when I was about your age back then. The news constantly reported on American troops coming home from this place called Vietnam. My mother and father tried to explain to me But not going into politics, it was my first memory of seeing our veterans coming home from a place that had no meaning to me. My second memory of the American military came from one of the most popular TV shows during that time. It was a show called MASH 4077, Mobile Army Surgical Hospital. It was primarily a comedy or a sitcom depicting doctors, nurses, and support staff, how they dealt with and survived the Korean War. It was funny, it was scary, it was maddening, it was nerve-wracking, but most important, it provided me with a sense of service. Not all of them wanted to be there, but they did so for their country. From our fiery birth in 1776 to freedom's latest triumphs in Iraq and Afghanistan, Americans veterans have always answered the call and given their wherever tyrants and despots imperiled freedom and democracy. A guy by the name of H.G. Wells coined that World War I phrase, the war to end all wars, but that was not to be. The earth was engulfed for a second time, and Americans of the greatest generation rose up to defend their homeland and to liberate two continents. And yet, even with that war's end, freedom's work was not complete. First in Korea, and then in Vietnam, two more generations of Americans responded with determination and vigor. They went proudly, willingly, on a mission of high principle and noble purpose to defeat aggression and defend freedom. They freed a captive nation and set free by renewing our faith in ourselves. Then the world went nuclear, and Cold War could have ended what we know as freedom today. And for the past 25 years, and more recently, we have called upon our all-volunteer force to deploy to the Middle East and Southwest Asia. And since September 2001, the global war on terrorism has been a significant burden on our soldiers, airmen, sailors, Marines, and their families. We gather this morning to show our gratitude to the veterans of the United States Armed Forces. Here and across the nation, Americans are making this day an expression of respect for all those who have worn the uniform for our country. This is a day of honor. The origins of this day, as stated before, were at the 11th hour of the 11th day of the 11th month in 1918, as guns fell violent to end the First World War. Ever since, Americans have set this aside to honor our veterans whose footsteps set the pace of freedom's march. One veteran, a company commander in Normandy, the Normandy invasion during World War II, returned many decades later to the cemetery overlooking Omaha Beach. He said, standing there in appreciation and sadness and a long postponed grief, I could only wonder, why not me? Millions of veterans have asked themselves that same question and has helped to shape the course of their lives. Veterans do not take life for granted. They know that duty and sacrifice are more than words, and they love America deeply because they know the cost of freedom, and they know the names and faces of the men and women who paid the ultimate sacrifice. The term veteran conveys more than a rank held in the past. Military service forms priorities and commitments that last for a lifetime. Every person who has put on the uniform, whether in time of war or in time of peace, has also felt a new sense of responsibility. It is an idea based on service. While we speak of our service members and our veterans on this particular day, be assured, people like me are defending us 365 days of the year. People enjoy the security of those who sacrificed. Army Staff Sergeant Clinton Romesha has seen war at its very worst. While serving at a combat outpost in Afghanistan, he and his comrades were awakened by an attack by an estimated 300 enemy fighters on October 3, 2009. According to his Medal of Honor citation, Staff Sergeant Romesha took out an enemy machine gun team and engaged in taking down a second when he received shrapnel wounds from a rocket-propelled grenade. He continued to fight on. He killed at least 3 other Taliban fighters and directed air support to destroy another 30 enemy fighters. After receiving the nation's highest military medal, Staff Sergeant Romesha said he felt conflicted. The joy, he said, comes from the recognition of us doing our jobs as soldiers on the distant battlefields, but is countered by the constant reminder of the loss of our battle buddies, my soldiers, my friends. Staff Sergeant Romesha's attitude is not hard to find among living Medal of Honor recipients. They will never forget the sacrifice of their friends, and neither will the Gold Star families, who will have to cope without the embrace of their loved ones. The innocence of their grieving children will be challenged by their dramatic change affecting the balance of security and comfort in their family routine. The hearts of these families will feel the sharp sting of their loss, leaving them only with memories of their loving mom or dad. Life as they have known it will be much harder from now on. Our debt to these heroes can never be repaid, but our gratitude and respect must last forever. For many veterans, our nation was important enough to endure long separations from their families, miss the births of their children, freeze in sub-zero temperatures, bake in the deserts, lose limbs, and far too often lose their lives. Military spouses have had to endure career interruptions, frequent changes of address, and a disproportionate share of parental responsibilities. The children have had often to deal with change in schools, separation from friends, and hardest of all, uncertainty whether their mom or dad would live through the next combat tour. And you know what's remarkable about our today's American military? We comprise less than 0.5% of the American population. As of January this year, we had about 1.3 million people on active duty and another 850,000 in the reserve components. And you compare that to the tens of millions that fought in both World War I and World War II, it's an amazing feat that we have accomplished. We are an all-volunteer professional force comprised of the most diverse population in any American organization or company. And in a few moments, we will honor 3 of our own heroes who have defended freedom of America. Each of these men, who we will recognize shortly today, also have their own story to tell. Stephen Ambrose once wrote, "America's wars have been like rungs on a ladder by which it rose to greatness. No other country has triumphed so long, so consistently, or in such a vast scale through the force of arms." And as we look out to the Middle East today, we know that there is a large, dangerous, and committed group of fanatics that want us dead. And while ISIL, ISIS, Al-Qaeda, and other terrorists may lack the conventional weapons of our traditional foes, they are every bit as evil as in their intentions. The notions of terrorism, homegrown violent extremists, and cyber attacks are what you cadets will have to face in your lifetime and deal with these emerging threats. 32 years ago, I stood here in this formation, just over there where the band is standing, and the foundations of what I learned in leadership, loyalty, duty, respect, selfless service, integrity, honor, and personal courage were instilled by the people of this institution. The faculty, the staff, coaches, even the ladies of the cafeteria where I worked many lunch hours to cover my meals. So I guess you might wonder why this old colonel is standing up before here today, but I have to tell you that I'm a very lucky individual, coming from Minneapolis, middle class, and had the opportunity to have parents who cared enough about me to give me the best education possible at St. Thomas Academy. So I'd also like to thank my parents for that opportunity. Thank you. The Army has given me the opportunity to see more than 50 different countries around the world and visit 5 continents. I was an average student who liked to do many things. I would take my shoulder pads off at halftime to play my saxophone with the band. I served as an altar boy here during Mass, and like I mentioned before, I worked in the kitchen so I didn't have to eat bologna sandwiches. What I learned at St. Thomas are things like French, which landed me a diplomatic posting at the U.S. Embassy in Morocco, serving with another Minnesotan, Ambassador Sam Kaplan. And I'm almost finished, but I did want to shift a bit to talk about St. Thomas as a learning institution and its goals. Number 1 goal at St. Thomas, to develop and nurture the intellectual, spiritual, moral, and physical potential of each and every one of you. Second, foster that knowledge and practice leadership so that young men have the confidence in being leaders and in choosing which leaders to follow. And the third goal is to establish the foundation of responsible leadership within the Academy, the Catholic Church, and the community. My experiences here at St. Thomas have prepared me to be the man, husband, father, and soldier I am today. I've been wearing a uniform since I was 14 years old. While my service to my nation has been serving in the armed forces, I encourage all of you cadets to reflect about what you could do to serve your community, your church, the great state of Minnesota, and even our great nation. While time is one of the most precious resources we have as individuals, it is time well spent giving back that which you have been given by God to share with the world. My father turned 80 years old this year and my mom 75. To give you an idea what I mean about service to the community, my parents to this day deliver communion to those who cannot make it to church. They deliver Meals on Wheels to those who cannot drive. And for the better part of a decade have been taking a guy from Hibbing to Chisholm, Minnesota to work because he's unable to drive. And my mom also teaches to those on the Iron Range how to make the best apple and cheese strudel in the world. The values my parents have instilled in me and my service in the military has also become because of them. St. Thomas Aquinas, for whom this institution is named after, will forever be remembered as the guy who proved the existence of God by arguing that the universe had to have been created by something, since everything in existence has a beginning and an end. St. Thomas founded everything he postulated firmly in Christianity. His service to the community came through teaching the common people around him how to understand faith without the abstract philosophy. He did this through what we now call the cardinal virtues: justice, courage, prudence, and temperance. His service to his faith and life are now forever remembered here on this campus. I would like to thank Lieutenant Colonel Mike DePulio, Commandant of Cadets, and Mike Maxwell for putting us in touch and inviting me here today. Thank you for inviting me to say a few words, Mike. I would like to thank everyone here today, especially the teachers, the faculty, and the staff, past and present, for all that you do to prepare these young men. In closing, today this is a day to honor our service members. Veterans have given us freedom, security, and the greatest nation on earth. It's impossible to put a price on that. So on this November 11th, please take time to remember the ever-important purpose of this day, a celebration to honor America's veterans for their patriotism, love of country, and willingness to serve and sacrifice for the common good. Perhaps you have a family member, a grandma, a grandpa, a mother or father, aunt or uncle, brother or sister, or some relative who has served this great country. When you get home today, I encourage you to post on Facebook or tweet them a thank you. We must remember them. We must appreciate them. To you cadets, I know you didn't have a choice but to sit here and listen, but thank you. To the rest of you, I want to thank you sincerely for all coming today. God bless you. God bless St. Thomas Academy. God bless our veterans, and God bless America.
Thank you very much. On Veterans Day, it is customary at St. Thomas Academy to render honors to members of the faculty, staff, and alumni community who have served in our nation's armed forces. These individuals embody the ideals of patriotism, mentorship, leadership, and setting the example. At this time, would the following people please stand? Ms. Jean Williams, 4 years with the U.S. Air Force. Mr. Gary Lofeck, 4 years of service with the United States Navy and Air Force. Mr. Mitch Chirashi, 6 years of service with the U.S. Navy. Mr. Kevin Zenner, 5 years of service with the U.S. Army, graduate of the United States Military Academy. Mr. Jason Sedlak, 6 years of service with the U.S. Army, graduate of the United States Military Academy, 1993, graduate of STA. Chef Ken Nelson, 6 years of service with the U.S. Army. Mr. Terry Bubak, 4 years of service with the United States Navy. Mr. Paul Solomon, 21 years of service with the United States Navy. And STA's military instructors. First Sergeant Fernando Hernandez, 23 years of service with the U.S. Army Adjutant General Corps. Sergeant First Class Doug Hurd, 23 years of service in the United States Army Field Artillery Branch. Chief Warrant Officer 3, Kim Freedy, 24 years of service in the U.S. Army Adjutant General's Corps. Chief Warrant Officer 4, Paul Preblich, 26 years of service in the United States Army Ordnance Corps. Lieutenant Colonel Mike DiPulio, 22 years of service in the United States Army Aviation Branch. At this time, would all of our former faculty members and veteran guests please stand? Thank you for your service. Thank you. Ladies and gentlemen, the STA Choir under the direction of Miss Julia Fahey.
If tomorrow all the things were gone I'd worked for all my life, and I had to start again with just my children and my wife, I'd thank my lucky stars to be living here today, 'cause the flag still stands for freedom, and they can't take that away. No, they can't take that away. And I'm proud to be an American, where at least I know I'm free. And I won't forget the men who died, who gave that right to me. And I'll gladly stand up next to you and defend her still today. 'Cause there ain't no doubt I love this land. God bless the USA. From the lakes of Minnesota to the hills of Tennessee, across from sea to shining sea, and down to Houston, New York to LA. Well, there's pride in every American heart, and it's time to stand and say, now it's time to stand and say that I'm proud to be an American, where at least I know I'm free. And I won't forget the men who died, who gave that right to me. And I'll gladly stand up next to you and defend her still today. 'Cause there ain't no doubt I love this land. God bless the USA. And I'm proud to be an American, where at least I know I'm free. And I won't forget the men who died, who gave that right to me. And I'll gladly stand up next to you and defend her still today. 'Cause there ain't no doubt I love this land. God bless the USA. God bless the USA.
Well, good morning, everyone, and for our guests from out of state, welcome back to Minnesota, as you couldn't tell by looking outside. Before I proceed, please allow me to introduce some special guests with us today. As always, sir, I'd like to acknowledge Mr. James Garberg, St. Thomas Military Class of 1941, recipient of the Distinguished Service Cross for his actions on the island of Attu in 1943, and our first Fleming Award recipient. Sir, it's always good to have you here. And I'd like to acknowledge some other special guests that we have today. Major General Harry Sieben, General and Mrs. Dennis Schulstadt, General and Mrs. J.T. Weir, and Major Jor Latimer. Thank you for attending today. And I can't continue without acknowledging two of my very favorite people, Sergeant Major Miles McDowell, St. Thomas military instructor. And Sergeant First Class Wayne Gifford, St. Thomas Academy military instructor from 1977 to 2006. Good to see you, Ryan. And lastly, I'd like to recognize the classes of 1942, 1949, and 1963. Welcome, gentlemen. As we enter into our 130th year, our military traditions remain true and steadfast. Archbishop John Ireland, who served as a chaplain for several Minnesota regiments in the Union Army during the Civil War, was instrumental in adopting military training as part of an overall curriculum for young men. As an avid student of history and the military art, Archbishop Ireland frequently observed World War I area military maneuvers and tactics at Fort Snelling, and he would cheer for St. Thomas cadets as they engaged in mock trench warfare against cadets from the University of Minnesota. In addition, Archbishop Ireland was known from time to time to personally inspect the Corps while in formation or serve as a reviewing officer during many military reviews. He even issued demerits to those deserving cadets. As a military institute, our list of graduates who have served this nation and our armed forces is long and distinguished. Our alumni have served in every conflict since 1890. Most notable was the World War II generation, where the vast majority of graduates from 1935 to 1945 all served with, sadly, 51 killed in action. In 2007, the administration approved a new award to honor our veteran graduates. The award is officially named the Fleming Alumni Veteran Award, or simply the Fleming Medal, after Captain Richard Fleming, class of 1935, and recipient of the Medal of Honor and our highest decorated graduate. In 2008, a design competition was held for cadets to create a medal that would capture the themes of St. Thomas Academy, military service, and country. After a difficult selection process, Cadet Andrew Schaefer, class of 2008, won the competition. His design superimposed the Maltese cross worn on the Cadet Class A lapel with the school crest, crossed rifle and saber, and 4 blue stones to symbolize the pillars of St. Thomas Academy. On the top of the medal, a Latin phrase reads, Pro Deus et Patria, for God and country. It is important to acknowledge and recognize the class of 2008 for their senior gift funded this effort. Mr. John William Battis, St. Thomas Military Academy, class of 1942. Mr. Battis hailed from St. Paul in Nativity Parish. Given that his 2 older brothers attended the academy, his parents did not give him a choice. They wanted a strong Catholic education for their boys, so the academy was where he was going. During his academy years, he was a superb student, receiving many Eagle Awards, and he was a member of the Cadothian Club, a club designed for students who loved physics and math. In addition, he excelled in all things military, where he was a member of the crack platoon and a member of the famous crack platoon on ice. They really did that. He was a cadet captain and the commander of Alpha Company. All of his friends called him JW, and he was known as one of the most liked fellows and respected cadets in the school. The 1942 yearbook states that he was the staunch commander of Alpha Company, and he will always be remembered for his timely quips. He entered the University of Minnesota in the fall of 1942, but soon found out that the Army was calling, and he reported for duty in January 1943. Like many of his St. Thomas Military Academy classmates, and due to his performance in military training, he was commissioned as an 18-year-old second lieutenant. He was transferred to Camp Robertson, Arkansas, where he taught English to recruits who couldn't read or write. After a few months, he headed to Fort Benning, Georgia, where he completed infantry officers and heavy weapons training. In early 1944, he was promoted to first lieutenant and soon found himself on orders to the European Theater of Operations. Just prior to shipping out, like many soldiers of his day, he took a few days' leave, he returned to St. Paul, and proposed to his high school sweetheart, Lorraine. He didn't have time or money to give her a proper engagement ring, so he gave her his most prized possession, his St. Thomas Military Academy class ring. Now, Lorraine was the beautiful girl from the neighborhood. A few years earlier, young Cadet Battis begged and pestered his parents to allow him to ask her on a date. Appropriately, their first date together was the 1939 military ball, and they're still together today. He spent 3 weeks on a troop ship headed to Italy and arrived in Naples, Italy on the 18th of April, 1944. He was quickly assigned to the 180th Infantry Regiment of the 45th Infantry Division, the Thunderbird Division. He found himself as a platoon leader on the Anzio beachhead, replacing another second lieutenant who was severely wounded and who ultimately won the Medal of Honor. Lieutenant Battis knew that things were about to become difficult. Eventually, the 45th Division pushed out from the Anzio beachhead and started their northward drive to Rome. Spring in Italy is very wet, and troops not only battled the Germans, but they battled rain and mud. On the 26th of May, 1944, Lieutenant Battis led his platoon up a stream bed to capture a German machine gun position. However, the Germans saw them coming and mortar fire began to fall. His face was hit by exploding shrapnel, and he was immediately evacuated to a field hospital. After a month, he was released and returned to his unit in time to march to Rome. A month later, his unit hit the beaches of southern France in Operation Dragoon. The 45th Division attacked north and joined units advancing from Normandy and Patton's Third Army to finally liberate France and push into Germany. One night near the German border, he was part of a patrol to reconnoiter nearby German positions. They stumbled across a German patrol trying to do the same thing. Both patrols jumped for cover and opened fire. Chaos ensued. His patrol began to fall back, but then they noticed that the captain leading the American patrol was missing. Lieutenant Battis stopped the patrol and instructed them to lay a base of fire on the Germans. While under close-range machine gun fire from the Germans, he moved forward, searched for the captain, and found the startled captain and saved him. For this, he was awarded the Bronze Star for heroism. After months of continuous combat, he was transferred to a service company where he would help plan USO shows for the troops. Finally, on the 8th of May, 1945, he returned home to St. Paul. Like thousands of veterans returning home after the war, he used the GI Bill, went to college, returned to the University of Minnesota, where he finally received a degree in engineering. He married Lorraine, moved to California, raised a family, and worked for an aerospace company that designed and manufactured rocket parts for the Apollo space program. Last year, the French government conferred on the former Lieutenant Battis the National Order of the Legion of Honor for his service in liberating France during World War II. The award created by Napoleon Bonaparte is the highest award that France can give. Very few Americans have received the Legion of Honor. His wartime decorations include the Bronze Star, the Purple Heart, the Italian Theater Campaign Star, the Southern France Campaign Star, the Army of Occupation Medal, the World War II Victory Medal, and the Combat Infantryman's Badge. John Battis lives a more peaceful life now with his bride Lorraine in Arizona. He is the third recipient from the St. Thomas Military Academy class of 1942 to receive the Fleming Award. Ladies and gentlemen, with distinct honor, the Fleming Medal is awarded to John William Battis, St. Thomas Military Academy class of 1942. Lieutenant Colonel retired Russell Jensen, St. Thomas Military Academy class of 1949. Colonel Jensen hailed from Minneapolis and attended Incarnation Grade School. He was a popular cadet who had the nicknames of Jens, Shmuel, and Shaky. He was a cadet sergeant first class, a member of the rifle team, Spanish club, and the citation. In addition, he was a varsity swimmer. His marksmanship skills were second to none, and he was part of the team that won the William Hurst National Championship Rifle Team Trophy. In his free time, he helped his father build bulk fuel storage facilities here in St. Paul. After graduation, Colonel Jensen attended St. Thomas College and enrolled in Air Force ROTC. He graduated in 1953 and was commissioned as a second lieutenant. Initially, he was an air traffic controller off the coast of Korea and then in Japan. In 1955, he returned to Minnesota and joined the Minnesota Air National Guard and was accepted for pilot training. After flight school, he was assigned to the 109th Air Fighter Interceptor Squadron and flew countless interdiction missions in the F-89 Scorpion over the North Pole, defending Canada and the United States from a potential Soviet bomber attack. Much to his and his fellow pilots' displeasure, the F-89 was phased out and the 109th Squadron was redesigned to air transport. All of the pilots were retrained in the C-97 Stratocruiser. In 1961, the 109th was sent to West Germany to provide airlift support during the Berlin airlift crisis. For over a year, Colonel Jensen flew missions day and night, sometimes in horrible weather, into the besieged city, provided needed medical food, medicine, food, and equipment to the citizens of West Berlin. As the Cold War continued, he flew hundreds of support missions into the Philippines and South Vietnam. In addition, he even flew elements of the 82nd Airborne Division during numerous airdrop exercises. In the early 1970s, he was designated as a command pilot and assumed command of the 109th Tactical Airlift Squadron. He retired from the Air Guard in 1991. Now, it's important to keep in mind that Colonel Jensen was a member of the Minnesota Air National Guard for much of his career. Being a pilot was not his full-time job. He amassed over 10,000 hours as a pilot during his career. Seems like a full-time job to me. In his civilian life, he served as an attorney practicing law in St. Paul. He is an aviation buff, spending time restoring and building vintage aircraft. He was the chairman of the Minnesota Air Guard Historical Foundation and was instrumental in obtaining several aircraft, including the C-97 Stratocruiser, for the museum at the airport. His ties to the Academy are deep. His brother and his sons attended the Academy, and he is a faithful member of the St. Thomas Military Academy class of 1949. America could not have survived without the sacrifices of citizen soldiers like Colonel Jensen. As Curtis LeMay, General, United States Air Force, and the Air Force Chief of Staff best summed it up on one of Colonel Jensen's award certificates in 1962, and I quote, "As you return to civilian life, take with you the gratitude of a grateful nation. You can be justifiably proud that your service played a vital part in preventing war and preserving peace and the security of the free world. Colonel Jensen is the 4th member of the class of 1949 to receive the Fleming Medal. Ladies and gentlemen, the Fleming Medal is awarded to Colonel Russell James Jensen, St. Thomas Military Academy, class of 1949. Lieutenant Colonel Robert C. Greene, St. Thomas Military Academy, class of 1963. Bob Greene's time at the Academy could be characterized as involved. He participated in many activities to include class government, the band where he was the drum major, the class play, the crack drill platoon, wrestling, track, and he was number 76 on the football team where he lettered all 4 years. And he was well known as a scholar in the Spanish language. Even as a senior in high school, the yearbook stated that he aspires to a military life. He didn't wait long. He enlisted in the Army shortly after he graduated as an infantryman. The Army quickly witnessed his talent and leadership abilities, and he was selected for Officer Candidate School and was commissioned as a second lieutenant in 1966. He completed Airborne School, the U.S. Army Special Forces School, where he earned the newly approved Green Beret and completed Vietnamese language training. He had a pretty good idea where he was going after his military schools were complete. He arrived in Vietnam in 1967 and was assigned to the Military Assistance Command Vietnam Studies and Observation Group, MACV-SOG. This was a highly classified multi-service United States Special Operations Unit which conducted covert unconventional warfare during the Vietnam War. His unit conducted strategic reconnaissance missions in South Vietnam, North Vietnam, Laos, and Cambodia. They carried out the capture of enemy prisoners, rescued downed pilots, and conducted rescue operations to retrieve prisoners of war throughout Southeast Asia. And they conducted clandestine team combat activities and psychological operations. Lieutenant Greene led a team of himself and approximately 6 to 10 Army of South Vietnam ARVN soldiers who were parachute qualified, highly trained, and experts in jungle combat operations. They were called Team Leloy, named after a 15th century Vietnamese king. They averaged 1 to 2 complex missions a month. During one mission, they recaptured a turncoat American soldier who became part of the Viet Cong and was making propaganda speeches against the United States. On another mission, his team was to observe the possibility the North Vietnamese were using elephants to haul supplies to infiltrate into South Vietnam. They did not find any elephants, but they did find transport trucks moving south, to which he called in multiple airstrikes to hit the communist supply column. Lieutenant Greene's life was a cat-and-mouse game against the North Vietnamese and Viet Cong forces, where death was around every corner. As a result, Lieutenant Greene became very close to the South Vietnamese men he led, and on numerous occasions he trusted them with his life. With these men, he spent countless days in the jungle tracking, fighting, and observing the enemy. In addition, they faced other unbelievable threats, such as panthers and being attacked and beaten by wild monkeys who were enraged when the team entered into their bedding ground. After a year in the jungle, he returned to Minneapolis and served as an Army recruiter. He returned right back to Vietnam in 1969 as the commander of N Company, 75th Ranger Regiment. For a year, his company of Rangers conducted long-range reconnaissance patrols and search and destroy missions in the Central Highlands of Vietnam. After the war, he continued his Army career as an infantry company commander at Fort Lewis, Washington, a college ROTC instructor in Wisconsin, a battalion commander, and the headquarters commandant of U.S. Army Europe in Heidelberg, Germany, where he led anti-terrorist operations against the Baader-Meinhof gang and the Red Army faction. In 1989, he retired with over 24 years of active service. He holds the Legion of Merit, the Bronze Star for personal heroism in combat, 2 2 other Bronze Stars for achievement in ground combat operations, the Ranger Tab, Parachutist Wings, the Combat Infantryman's Badge, and the Special Forces Tab. Colonel Greene remains in the Northwest today, residing in Olympia, Washington, where he spends his days golfing, hunting, traveling to Europe and Canada, and of course fishing. One of his greatest influences in his life was his St. Thomas Military Academy classmates. He learned from them fearless determination, confidence, and their charitable attitude towards others, backed up by action. He remains very close to his classmates today. He frequently credits his education at the Academy as providing him with a solid building block needed to be a success in life. He states the Academy provided him with the tools to serve his country with honor. And serve with honor you did, sir. He is the first member of the class of 1963 to receive the Fleming Medal. Ladies and gentlemen, the Fleming Medal is awarded to Colonel Robert Greene, St. Thomas Military Academy, class of 1963. Ladies and gentlemen, this concludes our program. For our distinguished guests and our Fleming Award recipients, please hang tight so we can get some pictures of you. Then there's a reception in the band room. All cadets are reminded that now is the time to report the third hour. We got to finish the day. That's the way it goes. Again, ladies and gentlemen, thank you for coming. Drive home safe, and our guests, there's a reception in the band room. Thank you.